The ice moon of Kalmar, 7, floated in the endless darkness of space, its surface covered in frozen crystals that sparkled like diamonds under the light of distant stars. Deep beneath the frozen ground, where the moon's core still held ancient warmth, there lived a creature that most of the galaxy believed was only a myth. Driven was a dragon, not the small, simple beast that some planets kept as pets, but a true dragon of the old world. His scales were the color of midnight, dark blue and black, with lines of silver running through them like rivers of starlight. He was massive, easily the size of a small spacecraft, and his eyes held the wisdom of countless centuries. 20 years had passed since the day that changed everything. In the central cavern, warmed by heat rising from deep below, a young woman moved through combat forms with fluid grace. Her name was Hyojin. She was human, with black hair tied back to keep it from her face, and dark eyes that seemed to hold an unusual fire within them. She wore simple clothes made from salvaged materials, practical and warm against the cold that seeped in from above. "Your stance is weak on the left side." Driven's voice rumbled to the cave like distant thunder. The sound was deep and ancient, yet there was warmth in it. Hyojin stopped and smiled slightly. "You notice everything, old one. I did not spend 20 years teaching you just to see you make simple mistakes," the dragon replied. Despite the stern words, there was affection there, clear to anyone who knew how to listen. Hyojin reset her position and began again. She had been doing these training exercises since she was old enough to stand. Driven had taught her to fight, to think, to survive in a world that was not made for humans. But more than that, the dragon had taught her about the universe, about history, about the rise and fall of civilizations that humans had never even heard of. She remembered nothing of her life before Driven. The colony ship that had crashed on this frozen moon was just a story to her now. She knew her birth parents had died in that crash, along with everyone else aboard. She had been just an infant, somehow surviving when all others had perished. Her first real memory was warmth, being held against scales that should have been cold but radiated heat like a living star. The steady rhythm of Driven's heartbeat had been her first lullaby, slow and powerful, like the beating of the world itself. "Why did you keep me?" Hyojin asked later, as they sat together in the main chamber. A pool of thermal water bubbled nearby, filling the air with steam. It was a question she had asked many times before, but somehow the answer always felt different. Driven was quiet for a long moment. The firelight from the thermal vents danced across his crystalline scales, making them shimmer and shift. "Because you were alone," he finally said. "Because I was alone. Because sometimes, child, family is not what we are born into, but what we choose to create." Hyojin nodded slowly. She had accepted this truth long ago. Yes, she was human. Her DNA was the same as any other member of her species. But in every way that truly mattered, she was Driven's daughter. He had fed her, protected her, taught her, loved her. That was what made them family. Outside the caves, ice storms howled across the surface of Kalmar 7. They were terrible things, winds that could strip flesh from bone, cold that could freeze metal solid in seconds. But down here, in their sanctuary, Hyojin and Driven were safe. The storms had kept them hidden from the rest of the galaxy for 2 decades. But storms were not the only dangerous things in the universe. And on this particular day, something else was coming. Far above, beyond the atmosphere of the ice moon, a ship changed its course. The vessel belonged to the Veskar Syndicate, a group of hunters who specialized in finding rare creatures and selling their parts to the highest bidder. They had picked up strange energy readings coming from Kalmar 7, unusual signatures that suggested something valuable might be hiding on that frozen rock. They did not know exactly what they would find, but they knew that unusual energy meant profit, and profit was all that mattered to them. Inside the ship, the hunters prepared their weapons. Nets made of pure energy, plasma spears designed to pierce the thickest armor, explosives powerful enough to bring down buildings. They were ready for anything, or so they thought. They came hunting for a legend, a myth, a creature that was supposed to be extinct. They would find something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. 3 days later, the warning came. It started as a tremor, a vibration in the ice that ran through the stone beneath their feet. Dreven felt it first, his ancient senses picking up what human perception could not detect. The dragon's head lifted sharply, eyes focusing on something far away. "We have visitors," Dreven said, rising to his full height. His massive form filled the cavern, scales catching the light like 1,000 mirrors. "Unwelcome ones." Hyojin's training took over immediately. She grabbed her thermal gear from the alcove where she kept it, pulling on the insulated jacket with practiced speed. Her heart was already beating faster. How many? A ship, perhaps a dozen hunters. Dreven's eyes narrowed to slits, and a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. "They seek me, child. They always do." It was not the first time someone had come looking. Over the years, there had been others. Treasure hunters who had heard whispers of a dragon on the ice moon. Scientists who wanted to study a creature they believed was extinct. But those had been individuals, easy to avoid or drive away. This was different. A whole ship, a coordinated group. These were professionals. The Veskar Syndicate ship touched down on the northern ridge, its landing gear crunching into the ice with a sound like breaking bones. The craft was ugly and functional, built for cargo rather than comfort. Scorch marks along its hull told stories of previous hunts, previous kills. Inside the ship, Vector studied the scanner readings with eyes that gleamed with greed. He was a creature from a world of eternal twilight, his skin gray and rough like old leather, his face marked with scars from a lifetime of dangerous work. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They were the eyes of someone who saw living things only as profit. "Dragon crystals," he said to his crew, pointing at the energy readings on the screen. "Organs, bones, all of it worth more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Enough to buy a planet if we wanted." His crew checked their weapons with eager hands. There were 12 of them, each one a specialist in hunting dangerous creatures. They carried nets made of pure energy that could hold even the strongest beast. Plasma spears that burned hot enough to melt through solid rock. Explosive charges that could bring down a building. They had hunted across 100 worlds and never failed to bring back their prize. "Spread out," Vector commanded as they left the ship. "Set the traps along the likely paths. This beast will try to run when it realizes we are here. Make sure it has nowhere to go." The hunters moved with professional efficiency. They planted sensor devices in the ice that would detect any large movement. They set up energy nets in the canyon passages that led away from the central cave system. They positioned plasma charges at key points, ready to detonate and block escape routes. By nightfall, they had found the caves. The entrance was partially hidden by ice formations, but their scanners showed the vast network of tunnels beneath. Heat signatures indicated something large living deep below. Hyojin watched them from a hidden position high on the cliff face. She had climbed up through a narrow chimney that only someone of her size could navigate. From here, she could see everything. The hunters setting their traps, the weapons they carried, the cold calculating where they worked. These were not her first visitors, but they were the most dangerous. She could see it in how they moved, how they prepared. They had done this before many times, and in their eyes, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Greed. Pure, simple greed. They did not see Dreven as a living being. They saw only credits and profit. When the hunters entered the deeper tunnels, following their scanners toward the central cavern, Dreven was waiting. The dragon had positioned himself in a large chamber where he would have room to move. His scales glowed with inner light, power building around him like a storm about to break. The battle was brief and brutal. Dreven's power lit up the caverns like a star being born. Energy blasted from his maw, turning ice to steam in an instant. His tail swept through the hunters like a club, sending bodies flying. His claws tore through their armor as if it were paper. But age had taken its toll on the ancient dragon. 20 years of using his power to keep Hyojin warm, to provide for her, to protect her from the harsh environment had depleted him. He was strong, yes, but not invincible. Not anymore. The hunters adapted quickly. They had fought dangerous creatures before and knew how to work together. An energy net, launched from 3 different angles at once, caught Dreven's wing and pulled tight. The dragon roared in pain and fury, trying to tear free. Then came the energy spears. 1, 2, 3 of them, launched from heavy weapons that 2 hunters had to carry together. They pierced through ancient scales that had turned aside weapons for thousands of years. Crystalline blood began to flow, glowing blue-white in the darkness. No! Hyojin's scream echoed through the tunnels as she ran toward the battle. She had been trying to flank the hunters, to attack from behind, but now all strategy was forgotten. Her guardian was hurt. Her father was bleeding. Driven saw her coming and reacted instantly. With a sweep of his tail, he created a wall of wind that picked Hyojin up and threw her backward, away from the hunters and their weapons. "Run, daughter!" His voice boomed through the cavern. "Run!" But Hyojin had never learned how to abandon family. As Driven collapsed to one knee, blood pooling beneath him, she circled back through the side tunnels. She came at the battle from a different angle, staying low, staying hidden. When Driven fell completely, his massive form crashing to the stone floor, Hyojin made her move. She rushed in, sliding beneath the hunter's grab, and reached her guardian. The dragon was still breathing, still alive, but barely. Using every bit of strength she had, Hyojin began to drag Driven toward the deeper passages, toward tunnels too small for the hunters to follow easily. It should have been impossible. Driven weighed as much as a spacecraft. But desperation and love gave Hyojin strength she did not know she possessed. Inch by inch, she pulled the dragon to safety. Vector watched the human girl disappear into the darkness with his prize. He could have chased her, could have tried to finish this now. But he smiled instead, a cruel expression that showed too many teeth. "Let them hide," he said to his remaining crew. "We have time. The dragon is wounded and losing blood. That primitive cannot protect it forever. We will rest, repair our equipment, and finish this tomorrow. There is nowhere for them to go." He was right about one thing. There was nowhere to run. But he was wrong about everything else. He was wrong about Hyojin being just a primitive human. He was wrong about her being unable to protect Driven. And most of all, he was wrong about having time. Because in the deepest sanctuary, where Hyojin worked frantically to save her guardian's life, something was about to change. Something that would turn a hunt into a horror story that the Veskar Syndicate would never forget. In the deepest sanctuary, far below where the hunters had reached, Hyojin worked with frantic desperation. Her hands moved quickly, applying pressure to wounds, using medical supplies from the old colony ship that she had salvaged years ago. Human medicine meeting draconic anatomy. She knew both subjects, had studied them her entire life, but she had never truly understood either one completely. Still, she had to try. She had to save him. Driven's breathing was wrong. Each breath came with a terrible rattling sound, like rocks scraping together deep in his chest. The crystalline blood had stopped flowing as much, but that might have been because there was less of it left to lose. His scales, normally bright and shimmering, had turned dull and gray. "Hyojin," the dragon whispered, his voice so quiet she almost missed it. "Do not talk," she said, pressing another bandage against the wound between his scales. Her hands were shaking. "Save your strength. You need to heal. Listen to me." Driven's eye opened, just one, the other two damaged a move. But that single eye focused on her with an intensity that made her stop working and meet his gaze. "There is something I never told you. Something important." Hyojin felt tears threatening to fall, but she pushed them back. "Tell me later, when you are better." "No, now." The dragon's voice grew slightly stronger, as if he was pulling energy from somewhere deep inside just to speak these words. "You were human when I found you. You are still human now. Your DNA has not changed. But 20 years living in my presence, breathing air filled with my essence, sleeping against my scales, you absorb something. Draconic energy. It has been changing you slowly all this time." Hyojin stared at him, not understanding. "What are you saying?" "Humans are adapters," Driven continued. Each word clearly caused him pain, but he pushed through it anyway. "It is your species' greatest gift and greatest strength. You adapt to survive. Your bodies change to match your environment. A human on a high-gravity world grows stronger bones. A human in darkness develops better night vision. It happens over generations usually, but you have been exposed to pure draconic essence since you were an infant. I do not understand, Hyojin said, though something deep inside her was beginning to stir, like waking from a long sleep. The power is in you, daughter. It has always been in you, growing, waiting. I gave you knowledge and training, yes, but the strength, that was always yours to claim. You just needed to know it was there. Dreven's breathing grew worse, more labored. You must awaken it now, for both our sakes. How? Hyojin asked desperately. How do I do that? Dreven reached out slowly, painfully, and placed one massive claw gently on her chest, right over her heart. Trust yourself. Trust what I taught you. The power was never mine to give. It was always yours to take. Now take it. Energy flowed from the dragon's claw into Hyojin's body. It felt like lightning and fire and ice all at once. She screamed as every cell in her body seemed to ignite. It was not pain, exactly, but it was overwhelming, too much sensation for her mind to process. Memories flooded into her consciousness, but they were not her memories. They were Dreven's. She saw battles fought thousands of years ago. She felt the joy of flight among the stars. She experienced the deep wisdom that came from living through the rise and fall of entire civilizations. And most importantly, she received knowledge. Combat techniques refined over millennia. The way of dragons. Ancient fighting forms that no living creature except Dreven had known. All of it poured into her mind like water filling an empty cup. Her body began to change. Not in appearance. She still looked human, still had the same face and form. But on a deeper level, everything was different. Her muscles restructured themselves, becoming denser, stronger. Her bones hardened, reinforced by crystalline deposits that formed at the molecular level. Her nervous system rewired itself to process information faster, to react quicker than any normal human could. Energy crackled around her hands like living lightning, blue-white light that illuminated the dark cavern. Her eyes, when she opened them, glowed with silver light that had never been there before. She could feel power coursing through her veins, raw and wild and waiting to be used. Hyojin stood up slowly, looking at her hands with wonder and something like fear. She could feel everything now. The heat from the thermal vents below, the vibrations of the hunter's footsteps far above, the very energy that held the atoms of her body together. It was intoxicating and terrifying. Outside the sanctuary, the hunters were moving again. She could hear them setting new charges, preparing to blast their way into the deeper tunnels. They thought they had won. They thought the dragon was helpless, and the human girl was no threat. Hyojin looked down at Dreven, who was watching her with pride in his ancient eyes despite his pain. "Rest now, old one," she said softly, and her voice seemed to carry more weight than before, more presence. "It is my turn to protect you." She turned toward the tunnel entrance, toward where the hunters were working. Each step she took left footprints in stone, small marks where her power had leaked out and burned the rock beneath her feet. Energy swirled around her like a living cloak, responding to her emotions, to her will. The hunters were about to learn a lesson that would echo across the galaxy. They had come hunting a dragon, thinking it was the most dangerous thing on this frozen moon. They were wrong. The dragon had spent 20 years creating something far more dangerous than himself. He had raised a human child in an environment of pure draconic power. He had trained her, taught her, shaped her into a weapon without even fully realizing what he was doing. And now that weapon was about to be unleashed. Hyojin walked toward the tunnel entrance, her eyes blazing with silver light, power crackling around her hands. She was still human. Yes, her heart still beat, her lungs still breathed, her blood still flowed red. But she was also something more now, something new, something that had never existed before in all the long history of the galaxy. She was a human who had been raised by a dragon, and she was about to show these hunters exactly what that meant. The Veskar Syndicate had come to kill a legend. Instead, they were about to create a new one. Vector was placing the final explosive charge against the tunnel wall when she emerged from the darkness behind him. He heard the footsteps and turned, expecting to see one of his crew members. Instead, he saw the human girl. Just a girl. Small, maybe 5.5 feet tall. Human, with her simple clothes and dark hair. Harmless looking, like any other primitive native he had encountered on 100 backwater worlds. "Move aside, primitive," he growled, turning back to his work. "This does not concern you. We are here for the dragon, not for you. Leave now and you will live." Hyojin stopped walking about 10 feet away from him. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a scientist might study an interesting insect. Then her eyes began to glow, not just reflect light, but actually produce it, blazing with silver-white radiance that cut through the darkness like twin stars. The other hunters, who had been working nearby, saw that light and stepped back instinctively. Something in their primitive survival instincts recognized danger when they saw it, even if their conscious minds did not yet understand. "You hurt my family," Hyojin said quietly. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried through the tunnel with perfect clarity. "That makes it very much my concern." Vector laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the ice walls. "Your family? That beast is not your family, girl. It is a resource. Valuable parts waiting to be harvested. Now move before I move you myself." The first hunter to fire was named Krell. He was nervous, spooked by the girl's glowing eyes and strange confidence. He raised his plasma rifle and pulled the trigger without waiting for orders. The bolt that emerged was military grade, designed to punch through armored plating on war machines. It could melt through 3 feet of solid steel. Hyojin's hand moved faster than the eye could follow. She caught the plasma bolt in midair, her fingers closing around the superheated energy as if it were a physical thing. The bolt struggled for a moment, trying to continue its path, then dissipated around her fingers like water running through a drain. Wisps of blue-white energy curled up from her palm and disappeared into the air. For a moment, everyone was frozen. Hunters stared with weapons half raised. Vector's mouth hung open in disbelief. It was impossible. Plasma could not be caught. Energy could not be held. This violated every law of physics they knew. Then Hyojin moved. She crossed the distance to Krell in less than a heartbeat. One moment she was 10 feet away. The next she was in front of him. Her fist struck his chest with a sound like thunder. The impact sent Krell flying backward through the air, his body crashing into 2 other hunters and taking all 3 of them down in a tangle of limbs and weapons. The tunnel erupted into chaos. Hunters fired from every direction. Plasma bolts, energy beams, solid projectiles, everything they had. The air filled with deadly light and sound. Hyojin danced through it all. She moved like water flowing between rocks, like wind slipping through trees. Every shot missed, not by much, just by inches, but it was enough. She seemed to know where each attack would be before it happened, moving with a grace that was part human strategy and part something far older and more primal. She used their own weapons against them. When a hunter fired a net launcher at her, she caught the edge of the energy net and spun, using the momentum to wrap the net around 3 other hunters instead. When another fired an explosive round, she kicked it back at him before it could detonate. The explosion threw him against the wall where he slumped, unconscious. Her strikes were precise and devastating. She did not waste movement. Every action had purpose. A palm strike to disable a weapon. An elbow to a pressure point that sent a hunter to his knees. A sweep of her leg that took down 2 attackers at once. Human tactical thinking merged perfectly with draconic power. She fought like a chess master who could also move at the speed of light. 5 hunters fell in the first 10 seconds. 3 more in the next 5. They were professionals trained and experienced, but they might as well have been children facing a force of nature. Vector watched his crew being dismantled with growing horror. This was not possible. She was just a human, just a primitive girl from a backwater moon. But then he remembered the dragon, remembered the power it had shown before they brought it down. And he understood with terrible clarity that this girl had been raised by that dragon, taught by it, changed by it. He made a decision. His hand went to control device on his belt and pressed the emergency activation button. From the ship on the northern ridge, something massive began to move. Heavy footsteps shook the ice as the behemoth suit walked toward the caves. The behemoth was Vector's insurance policy, a 12-foot-tall mechanized suit, heavily armored and bristling with weapons. It was designed specifically for hunting megafauna, creatures the size of buildings, plasma cannons that could level a city block, molecular blades that could cut through anything, energy shields that could withstand direct hits from a warship's weapons. The last conscious hunter fled as the behemoth entered the tunnel, its massive form barely fitting through the passage. Vector climbed at the back of the suit and sealed himself inside the cockpit. Through the targeting display, he could see Hyegen standing calmly, watching the machine approach. "You are just a human." Vector screamed through the suit's external speakers. His voice cracked with desperation and rage. He activated every weapon system at once. Plasma cannons roared. Missiles launched. Energy beams cut through the air. The tunnel filled with so much destructive force that the ice walls began to melt. Hyegen smiled. It was not a kind expression. It was a smile of a predator who had been holding back and could finally let go. "No," she said, and though she spoke quietly, her voice somehow carried over all the noise and chaos. "I am something better." She began to walk forward, directly into the storm of weapons fire. Energy shields flickered around her body, deflecting attacks. When a plasma bolt got through, her skin absorbed it, channeling the energy into her own power. She was not just surviving the assault. She was feeding on it. "I am what happens when humanity is given a chance to become more," she continued, still walking steadily forward. "I am what you created when you threatened my family." She leaped. The jump carried her 30 feet straight up, her body seeming to float for a moment at the apex. Then she came down, fist first, glowing with concentrated energy that made the air around it shimmer and burn. Her fist struck the behemoth suit's head like a meteor hitting the earth. The sound was deafening. Metal shrieked and tore. The suit's shields, designed to stop warship weapons, shattered like glass. The armor plating, 3 inches of reinforced titanium alloy, crumpled like paper. The behemoth suit collapsed to its knees, then fell forward with a crash that shook the entire tunnel system. Warning lights flashed in Vector's cockpit as system after system failed. He hit the emergency release and crawled out of the wreckage, broken and bleeding. Above him, through the hole in the tunnel ceiling that led to the surface, he could see his ship taking off. The remaining hunters had fled, abandoning him. The footage went viral across the galactic network within hours. Every hunter who had escaped carried recording devices in their armor, standard equipment for documenting kills and proving the value of their prizes. But this time, the recording showed something very different. They showed a human moving like a god, fighting with power that shattered every understanding of her species, catching plasma bolts with bare hands, moving faster than targeting computers could track, destroying a behemoth suit with a single strike. The video spread from system to system, planet to planet, species to species. Within a day, billions of beings across the galaxy had watched the footage. Within a week, everyone knew about the human girl who had been raised by a dragon. In the human scientific community, the response was immediate and intense. Dr. Taijun, one of the leading experts on human biology and evolution, called an emergency session of the Galactic Human Science Council. Representatives from every major human colony attended via hologram, filling the virtual auditorium with hundreds of eager, excited faces. "This changes everything," Dr. Taijun said, his hands shaking slightly as he pointed to the paused footage on the screen behind him. "For years, we have believed that humans were limited by our biology. We are not as strong as the Korgoth, not as fast as the Velix, not as long-lived as the Eternals. We thought these were fixed limitations, things we could never overcome without technology." He pressed a button, and the footage played again, showing Hyegen moving to the hunters like a force of nature. "But this proves we were wrong. We are not limited by our biology. We are limited by our environment. Given the right conditions, exposed to the right forces, human beings can adapt and become anything." The auditorium erupted into discussion. Scientists shouted questions and theories. Some were excited, seeing unlimited potential for human evolution. Others were cautious, warning about the dangers of trying to replicate what had happened to Hyegen. But all of them agreed on one thing. Humanity's understanding of itself had just been fundamentally changed. Other species took notice as well. The Collective, a coalition of advanced races who had dismissed humanity as weak newcomers to galactic stage, held their own emergency meetings. For decades, they had treated humans as children, limiting their access to certain technologies, restricting their expansion into contested territories. They had believed humans were fragile, temporary, a species that would fade away or be absorbed by stronger cultures. Now they were not so sure. If one human, given the right conditions, could become this powerful, what could humanity as a whole become? The question kept their leaders awake at night. The warrior clans, brutal species who had often mocked human fragility and weakness, fell silent. Their champions had studied the footage frame by frame, analyzing every movement, every strike. What they saw disturbed them deeply. The human girl fought with a combination of strategy and power that none of them could match. She was not just strong. She was smart, adaptive, creative in ways their rigid warrior traditions could never be. Some clans sent messages to their members, warning them to avoid conflict with humans. Others began to show humans a new kind of respect, the respect given to a potential equal rather than a harmless inferior. On Kael'mar 7, far from the politics and panic her actions had caused, Hyojin knelt beside Dreven in their sanctuary. The dragon's wounds were healing, much faster than they should have been. Hyojin had discovered that she could channel her own energy into Dreven, the same way he had once given his energy to her. The flow worked both ways now, guardian and child sustaining each other. "The galaxy is talking about you," Dreven said softly, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "You have become famous, daughter." Hyojin smiled slightly, still focused on maintaining the energy flow. "I do not care about fame. I care that you are healing. I care that we are safe." "We will never be truly safe," Dreven replied, but there was no sadness in his voice. "But now, at least, those who come will come with respect instead of greed. Or they will come with fear, which works just as well." Weeks passed, then months. Dreven recovered fully, his scales regaining their bright shimmer, his strength returning. But something had changed on Kael'mar 7. Word had spread, not just about the dangerous human, but about what the ice moon represented. A sanctuary, a place where the lost could find safety. The first ship arrived on a cold morning. It carried Mincio, a human engineer who was fleeing from a corporate hit squad. He had discovered illegal activities in his company and reported them. Now the company wanted him dead. He had heard about Kael'mar 7, about the human who protected it, and he came seeking refuge. Hyojin met his ship personally. She listened to his story, saw the genuine fear in his eyes, and welcomed him. "You can stay," she told him, "but you must work. We all contribute here, and you must help defend this place if danger comes." Mincio agreed eagerly, just grateful to be alive and safe. More came after him. Jaiwu, an alien child whose own species had abandoned her because she was born different, unable to survive in their high-radiation homeworld. An elderly couple from a colony that had been destroyed, with nowhere else to go. A former soldier who could not live with what his government had made him do. Outcasts, refugees, the hunted, the lost. They all found their way to Kael'mar 7. Hyojin welcomed them all. She set up shelters using salvaged materials from old ships. She organized a growing community, making sure everyone had food and warmth. And she trained them not to become what she was. That was impossible. But to become what they could be, to defend themselves, to stand together, to be strong as a community, even if they were weak as individuals. Dreven watched with pride as his daughter built something beautiful from the chaos. "You have created a family of the lost," the dragon observed one evening as they stood together on the ice cliffs, watching another ship descend with new arrivals. "I learned from the best," Hyojin replied, leaning against the dragon's massive form the way she had done since she was a child. Across the galaxy, things continued to change. Human colonies began seeking out other ancient species, not to conquer them or control them, but to learn from them, to grow alongside them. They called it the Dreven Protocol, named after the dragon who had proven what was possible. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Humanity's true strength was not in its technology or its numbers. It was in the ability to adapt, to change, to become something greater when given the right knowledge and environment. And the best way to unlock that potential was not through isolation, but through connection with other species, other ways of thinking, other forms of power. Some colonies sent their young to live with the Eternals, to learn patience and long-term thinking. Others established partnerships with the Korgoth, seeking to understand their strength. Still others found the remnants of ancient, nearly extinct species, and offered protection in exchange for knowledge.